Hello and welcome to Finding Joy, hosted by Capital One. I'm Lula Dualeh, Director of Audience Development for Black Enterprise. Finding Joy is our joint video series hosted by Capital One that focuses on finding joy in the workplace and features Capital One associates who've cultivated joy through various professional experiences. Today's episode is all about finding joy in our identities outside of work. My guest today is Clint Grimes, SVP for Procurement at Capital One. He discusses how he finds his joy in his identity outside of work and dispenses advice for others on how to do the same. Clint, I'm so excited for you to join us today.
Thanks, Lula. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so let's just jump right in. Tell us about you. What does a Chief Procurement Officer do at Capital One?
So CPO's role in a company is really focused on a few things. One is identifying those third parties, those suppliers that we need to engage to do, the tasks that we need done, and actually negotiate agreements with them, have those agreements signed, and then manage that supplier relationship for as long as they are part of our supply chain. And then ultimately, when they offboard, when we move on to another supplier, it's making sure that that termination process is very clean and crisp, and all of the consumer data, in our case, is removed from those systems, from those vendors, and ensuring that we have data security as well.
Wow. We know that Capital One has a lot of business resource groups. Are you a part of any? And why do you think that is so important at Capital One?
And I am. I'm part of, we have a number of business resource groups. The two that I engage with, the first is called Voices. It is the Black Employee Resource Group. I'm on the advisory board there, and it's of course focused on the sort of care and feeding, health and well-being of our Black employees. The other is a group called Outfront, and Outfront is our LGBTQ plus business resource group. Really focuses on, again, that health and well-being of our LGBTQ plus population. And these BRGs are really important from a couple of perspectives. One is, of course, the employees themselves, but the other is the business part of it, where we have customers that span all identities, ideally across the country. And what we want to make sure of is that we utilize and we tap into the talent we have internally to get their perspectives on products or services or messaging that we're putting out, and ensuring that it resonates authentically with those communities. So in the past, these groups have been called employee resource groups. And that shift toward business is really sort of rooted in the fact that we are utilizing these voices and perspectives in determining the business approaches that we take.
Right. I mean, we're just now coming off of Pride Month, right? Focusing on LGBTQIA groups. And I know that that's very important now in the workplace. How do you feel about BRGs, business resource groups? How do you feel about that fitting into diverse and inclusive organizations? And where do you see more opportunities for growth in those spaces?
I think BRGs fit into organizations. I'll start kind of at the beginning. Yeah. When organizations are out recruiting people, recruiting talent to bring into their organizations, what's really helpful is to have those prospective employees, in our case, prospective associates, see people who look like them and identify in the way that they do. And it sends this not so subtle message that you are welcome here, and the whole you is welcome here. So BRGs serve that purpose. And one of the things, like I said earlier, is having BRGs provide that voice and that perspective in times of turmoil, in times of challenge, really holding the organization accountable and ensuring that the organization is living up to its principles when it comes to those communities. It's really been, as you can imagine, in the last couple of years, really helpful and really important for the perspectives presented by these BRGs to be present in meetings where perhaps members of those BRGs are not in, but where policy and approach and priorities are being determined, and ensuring that those voices and those perspectives weigh into what the company ends up doing and how the company ends up showing up in tough times.
You know, what I love about what you said, Clint, is that bring your whole self to work, and then your whole self is welcomed at Capital One. I love that so much. You joined Capital One over a year ago from Warner Media, coming from a creative media industry to what can be known as a more reserved financial industry. What has the transformation journey been like for you to navigate the workplace while being true to your authentic self?
It's been interesting. I made the decision when I moved from media to financial services that I'm bringing me. You know, I am who I am, and I was not really buying into or paying attention to sort of the industry's reputation. So I've been my authentic self. I've been very, very open with who I am and what I bring to the table. In dialogue that I had from the very first meeting when we started discussions about whether, about bringing me on board, it really was, this is who I am and this is what's important to me. And the fact that Capital One listened, paid attention to, and really kind of celebrated what I'm bringing to the table, I thought that was what made Capital One particularly attractive. I have friends at other financial institutions, and they're seeing this change in their experience as well. I have to say, Capital One, because of our sort of tech-heavy focus on the work that we do, we have had for a while the need to attract tech talent that would have historically gone to one of the tech companies. And those companies very much lean into and pay attention to that whole self and bringing all of you to the table and being able to take advantage of that. So for me, it's not really a conscious decision to bring my authentic self. I am who I am. I'm a very simple guy, and I do the work that I need to do. I think I add value, and I'm pretty confident in, being who I am in those spaces that I'm in. So it wasn't a shift for me. It was, I think, perhaps a shift for the organization, because I am so open about who I am. And also, in media, it was different because being who you are, it's all in that creative process. It kind of infuses everything within media, whether it's the writers or the directors or the producers of content, but also just kind of the overarching corporate offices and the corporate structures and the values that organizations in that space bring to bear. It was just natural in that environment to be open. And so I just kind of brought that with me when I came to Capital One.
Incredible. Within the office that you've shared with your team in Pride Month communication, that there is an intersectionality to your identity, both as a Black man and a gay man. Can you tell us more about what that intersectionality means in your life outside of the office?
It's interesting that I'm going to say I don't really pay a lot of attention to that outside of the office because it's just me. Give you a little background. I mean, I've been with my husband for the last 25 years. We've been married for the last 10 years. And so it is just my life that I'm living and I'm enjoying, and not really being as thoughtful in this context, intersectionality context, as I think actually maybe not as focused on it as maybe I should, because I take it for granted. Wow. And it's always been the case that, when it's sort of, like I said, you get the whole me, it's like you get what you get, and this is who I am. But what I've been really thoughtful about within Capital One is being that same sort of, bringing that same kind of nonchalance to the table, because it's not a big deal, and it shouldn't be a big deal. But I'm very open. And I communicate in the same way that others do about what they did on their weekends, and what families they did, family members they visited, or what they did as a family. Same thing. I mean, that's the important part, that it isn't different. But I'm aware that it is. I'm not so naive as to believe that it's not. And I was asked recently about being a Black man, being a gay man, like the challenges, and the thought I had was they're very different. I don't have to tell you I'm a Black man. I mean, if you see me, it becomes blatantly obvious that I am. And so what comes with that we all know, is a whole collection of expectations and perspectives and just weightiness that comes with it.
Yeah.
It doesn't come as much as a gay man. I mean, it's sort of, okay. It's sort of, so it is, the question I was asked was, is it harder, more challenging? Which identity? And it's just easy. Being a Black man in America is significantly more challenging than being a gay man in America. And it's something that significant amount of work still needs to be done on. But it is what it is. And another thing about intersectionality, all of us are intersectional. All of us bring varied personality traits and aspects of ourselves wherever we go. Some are just more obvious than others, and some are just more, like I said earlier, kind of weighty than others. And so, yeah, it's intersectionality is important. I try to make sure that it's thought about. Within my group, we've started another BRG, where members of my group helped start another BRG that's really looked at, they call it third culture stories. And the idea of third cultures is really focused on that notion of intersectionality. And the original sort of core of this is, either immigrants, first generation immigrants to the United States, and that intersectional existence they have with their parents who may not be native English speakers and themselves, or children of mixed parents. They have a different experience than either of their parents did. And listening to those stories it's really interesting, because it's not something I had given a lot of thought to. In the fact that, yeah, it's a third culture. It's a different cultural experience. It's a different day-to-day interaction that they have. And it's kind of the same thing for me. And when you sort of broaden out those perspectives that you're bringing to the table because of the life that you've lived or who you are, everybody is part of this kind of third culture,
Right.
Largely because we are all carrying with us aspects of ourselves, obvious and non-obvious, that make us unique.
Clint, you just dropped so many gems. I'm taking mental notes in my head right now, because I also identify as a third culture kid. Both of my parents are Somali immigrants. So a lot of what you shared really resonated with me. Do you celebrate your identity as a Black man differently than you celebrate your identity as a gay man?
I do, of course you do. And you celebrate kind of the cultural norms. And just another piece, I grew up in a really small town in Arkansas many moons ago. I won't tell you how many. And that experience, as a Black kid growing up in the South, really informed a lot of my perspectives on things, and the ability to kind of celebrate that, and we celebrate that differently than sort of Pride Month and when same-sex marriage became legal and the opportunity to have a similar existence to others who have historically been able to get married, that's different. It's both important and both sort of tug on different components of who I am and land differently. You know, the family barbecue, the family reunion over the summer. I mean, that lands differently than Pride Month, but both are important and both are part of who I am.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to share about the things that bring you joy in your life outside of the office?
Yeah, I'm an eclectic person. I have like many different sort of facets. Another facet is, so I went to MIT undergraduate. So I have a mechanical engineering degree and I was an automotive design engineer early in my career. So being in banking, don't get to do much of that. Don't get to do any of that, you know, related to work. So what I do is I actually restore old cars as my hobby. So on weekends, I am typically up to my elbows in grease, you know, sort of rebuilding this engine or this transmission or doing body work or things like that. And particularly I focus on, there's a Swedish car brand that unfortunately went belly up, Saab. And I'm a very big Saab fan. I've restored a few cars. I'm part of the Saab owners club. And so I take my cars to car shows. But that's really what gives me joy. That's really what sort of, kind of, checks the box for me. Those kinds of things. And even when I was a little kid, I used to do things. I used to take apart like the toaster just to figure out how it worked. And that's kind of how I'm wired. So having an outlet like that is really, really helpful for me to kind of, scratch that itch as I need to. But, that I enjoy my family. My husband's actually from Argentina. And so I'm a permanent resident of Argentina. And so I make my way down there as much as I possibly can. I have nieces and nephews and a huge family in Buenos Aires. And so, so it's, outside of work, I have a number of things that bring me joy in life. And I think it's important to have that. I think it's important that your life not revolve around the job and the job not be your life. The job is part of your life and may impact your life, but your life should be broader, more fulfilling than your job.
Yeah, listen, I'm definitely going to Google sobs after this conversation to learn more about it. But what advice do you have for our listeners to find more joy in their own identities?
I first of all, recognize your identities. Like, step back, who am I? Like, what are the constituent components that make up me? Number one. Number two, what brings you joy? Like, what makes you happy? What gets you energized? And find ways to connect the two. Find activities that celebrate your intersectionality or the components of your intersectionality, and be deliberate about it and be thoughtful about it and like be your own best, I guess, advocate or supporter or support system or whatever, because you know who you are, you know how you're wired, and you know the things that drive your energy higher. Over index on those things, and be you. Like don't pay so much attention to everybody else and what's going on out there. Be you, celebrate you, enjoy your life, and have that at the core of what you focus your attention on. I mean, that's fundamentally, only you can make you happy. And I think that's an important thing to understand.
Only you can make you happy. That's what I'm going to take away from this conversation. Thank you so much, Clint. It's been an incredible conversation on finding joy in our identities outside of work. And thank you to Capital One for bringing us this important discussion. And thank you for watching. See you next time.